Ahoy! And welcome to the Boating Hour with Captain Rick. The Boating Hour brings you the latest and greatest essential information about everything that sails, floats, or motors upon the high seas of Southern California. From landlubbers to old salts, there'll be something for everyone. So climb aboard and get ready to sail with Captain Rick.
Ahoy out there, and welcome to the Boating Hour. I'm Captain Rick, and I want to thank you for joining us here on AM 870. We're here every Saturday at 4 p.m. Please be sure to visit us on the web at theboatinghour.com, and now all over social media on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble, The Boating Hour with Captain Rick. Thanks to our sponsors for our show today. For a healthy gut, the best probiotic on the market, Livia One Probiotics, natural, organic, and allergen-free. And Raycom Radios, reliable two-way radios throughout Southern California without all the inherent problems of all the other kind of communications, no drop zones, and great coverage. Raycom Radios, by the way, the founder of that will be coming on the show, so look forward to that sometime in the future. Talking about guests on the show, in studio, Jensen Crawford from the Coast Guard Auxiliary. Thanks for joining us here. Thanks for joining me, Captain Rick, on the Boating Hour.
Hey, it's great to be here, Captain Rick. You know, just amazed that we keep blasting out 50,000 watts of boating information every week here on AM 870.
You know, I almost forgot who I was, Captain Rick. I forgot the show. Also with us, Tom Lasser. Tom, thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining Jensen and my co-host, the Coast Guard teddy bear that protects children when they sleep at night, and Captain Rick on the Boating Hour. Thanks for joining us, Tom.
A big ahoy back to you guys, and as we say in the Army, hooah.
Hooah. What do the Navy say? Army says hooah. What do the Marines say? What do the Marines say?
The Marines say oorah. The Navy, in my opinion, says ooga.
Ooga. You know, Tom, I got to tell you this, because we're going to talk all about your affiliations with promoting all the different vet groups and how important it is for the Armed Forces Parade, which, of course, the Coast Guard was a featured branch last year. So we're going to talk about that. But my favorite line in any show was at Few Good Men when they were in Guantanamo. And Tom Cruise, his character, looks at Kiefer Sutherland, of course, who's the Marine, and says, "You don't like us too much." And Kiefer Sutherland looks at him. He did a great job in this role. "Yes, I do. Anytime we got to go somewheres and fight, you boys give us a ride." I thought that was one of the greatest lines in the movie. Of course, we all remember it from "You Can't Handle the Truth," but that was one of my favorite. Anyway, Tom.
Classic movie. Love it. Yeah,
it was really good. You know, they were all such a great. I've watched it over and over. One of the few movies I can watch over and over again, and I think it really did a good job of showing, the different branches and, really promoting them. Well, speaking of that, let's talk about the Armed Forces Parade. Happened a couple of weeks ago, and you were part of the committee, and you've been involved with that for many, many years. How far back do you go with the Armed Forces Parade?
Well, the first Armed Forces Parade today was in 1960, but I've been with the parade since 1992. I was commanding Los Alamitos Army Airfield, and it was a couple weeks after the 1992 L.A. riots, and the National Guard wanted to toot their horn for their involvement in the civil disturbance. So the Adjutant General contacted the base at Los Alamitos and wanted the National Guard to participate with the flyovers, tanks, and the like, which is normal. But what they added was the 1st Battalion, 160th Infantry out of Inglewood Armory was just being demobilized, and they were driven from downtown L.A. To the parade start, and at the very end of the parade, all the National Guard guys with their weapons in full battle rattle got off their buses, lined up, and followed the parade and got a standing ovation as they went by the route. And then the buses were waiting for them at the end. They got on the buses, went back to the armory, and demobilized. And for all intents and purposes, right after the riot, that was the highlight of the parade.
God, I can imagine. Well, last year I thought the Coast Guard was the featured branch, and they had a really good presence. And I thought one of the highlights of the parade was not just the cadets being sworn in from all the different branches, and that, of course, was Coast Guard, our senior flag officer at that time, and then was the promotion of senior chief, and senior chief Chastain was on my show, and she was promoted. She had her son with her, and I don't think there was a dry eye in the audience. Of course, senior chief being the highest rank for enlisted. So that I thought was one of the highlights of the parade. Of course, I love the parade. Tom, I've mentioned this a couple times. I was in that parade as a Cub Scout. I can't remember how far back it was. It was a long time ago, holding one of the little banners. And I like how they had the scouts there again this year. Both the scouts for both the girls and the boys were holding the banners. Did you notice that is something they do every year? They got the scouts up front.
Yes, they do, and it's one of the signature parts of the parade is to get youth involved at that level to understand patriotism, Americana, the military, and the community. And I like it when they interject the junior ROTC, the Sea Cadets, the high school bands in the parade itself, because it's a good visual, and it's a good education part for the young people of America.
Well, we, the Coast Guard Auxiliary, or the civilian volunteers that assist the Coast Guard, we had a wonderful showing. Did you notice that actually Al Verdi, who I'm going to invite on the show at some time, and Jensen, you could talk about that. So Al Verdi got a silver award. He's the National AFRA Silver Award winner for the rescue at sea. So he got a wonderful award demonstrating superb vigilance, skill, and teamwork. So they had rescued a crew that had a disabled boat at the Jetty Rocks in the high winds off of the pier in Long Beach. And his boat displaying the banner, that wonderful banner. They were there. We didn't have anybody on the crew, but Al had his boat there, and the Coast Guard Auxiliary towed a few, and the Coast Guard, of course. So that was pretty amazing. What do you know, Jensen, about that rescue? Do you know the details of that?
I know that there was a boat up on the rocks that called in for help. Al and his auxiliary boat happened to be the closest vessel, so they were called upon to perform rescue. They came up on the boat, were able to pull it off of the rocks, and save everybody from being dashed on the rocks. So it was a pretty impressive feat, and a lot of it has to do with just being trained and then having people out on the water so that we are close to where danger might be.
Well, I'm going to invite the entire crew on, Al and the entire crew, as a matter of fact. I have the announcer's copy. I'm going to read the announcer's copy. So the vessel, Adesso 2, operated by Commodore Al Verdi, is a 25-foot 2007 Sea-Doo 255 Tomcat, equipped with full navigational suite, features twin hull, twin outboard design for advanced stability. The auxiliary crew patrols the port of Los Angeles, Long Beach, assisting the Coast Guard for search and rescue operations and keeping a watchful eye for potential threats. Adesso 2 has top speeds of 40 knots, allowing for quick response and effective operations in emergency situations. So Adesso 2 is a 2024 national winner of the AFRA's Silver Award for a Rescue at Sea. AFRAS is the Association for Rescue at Sea, AFRAS, Association for Rescue at Sea. And on July 2nd, 2023, Adesso 2 and crew, Commodore Al Verdi, Lori Barfield, and Mr. Durer, J.D. Durer, rescued 7 people from their disabled boat at the Jetty Rocks and high winds and chop off of Pier J in Los Angeles, Long Beach Harbor, so demonstrating superb vigilance and teamwork. I don't think I read that as good as the announcer did.
Well, yeah, I think that's probably why they don't have you doing the announcing there.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, Tom, how long has this announcer been there? He's one of the most amazing announcers. I don't think he tripped over his words. It was absolutely perfect. I thought it was almost AI. Real handsome guy. How long has he been there? He's fantastic.
He's been there about 7 or 8 years. Emmett Miller, he used to be with the local TV station here in Los Angeles, and now I think he does national work for ABC, but he lives in this area. But he's a professional. He also emceed military dinner that evening and did a good job doing that also.
Yeah, the military dinner was absolutely amazing. Well, I'll tell you something else. Let's talk about the parade again, which of course happened a couple weeks, and then we'll talk about the Fleet Week in future shows that was at the Battleship Iowa during Memorial Day weekend. But the featured branch this year was Space Force, and this is their first time being the featured branch. And the Lieutenant General Philip Grant was the United States Space Force commander at Space Systems Command. So he was honored. He was fantastic. But they had an astronaut. They had a wonderful astronaut. And in the parade, because the Space Force, their assets are satellites and complicated stuff in space, I thought it was wonderful. They took golf carts. Jensen, they took golf carts and used, I don't know, tin foil and paper mache and turned the golf carts into rolling satellites. The kids went wild on the route. It was absolutely fantastic.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I don't know, Tom. Could they have pulled the satellite down and marched that through the parade?
They actually had a part of a satellite in the display area, but I thought that was very creative and imaginative of those folks. He spoke well at the dinner. He spoke very well at the luncheon. And he was one of the highlights of the parade. They usually get a celebrity like they had the actor last year who was spectacular with the Coast Guard, but this guy was the real deal. This guy was the epitome of the right stuff, and I thought he was a highlight at the dinner and the parade.
Yeah, and apparently, now I just learned from Jensen that the first Space Force astronaut was originally Air Force, and what's the story? He went from the Air Force to the Space Force while he was up in space.
Yeah, he transferred from the Air Force to the Space Force while he was in orbit, and became the first Space Force astronaut. Kind of a unique, one-of-a-kind story, as it turns out.
Well, I got my picture with him. We at the Coast Guard Auxiliary in the exhibit area. I don't know how many people you think came. Last year was a little over 100. I think about the same this year. I think.
I'm going to guess it. Yeah, I'm going to guess probably about the same. The weather was good. A great turnout. Good flyovers. And the display area was a little bit bigger than last year. And I want to make a point that Coast Guard Auxiliary always shows up. They were a big part of the display area and the parade, and I'm always impressed with the Coast Guard presence at all the parades, all the events, very professional, very community-oriented. So the Coasties get a feather in their cap, in my opinion, for their participation in the Torrance Armed Forces Day Parade.
Well, hey, we appreciate that. And my dad was served in the 3rd Armored Division in Korea, so I'm always thrilled to see the tanks and all the Army assets that are there.
You're going to see a lot. You're going to see a lot next year. The Army was supposed to be the featured hosted service this year, but because next year is the 250th anniversary or the birthday of the Army said they wanted to do it next year. And I was at a committee meeting, and a couple of us volunteered the Space Force because they did so good last year that they slipped in this year and did a really good job. But the Army is going to be in charge next year, and the Army always shows up. You're going to see Black Hawk helicopters, Apache helicopters, the Chief of Staff of the Army, the Secretary of the Army, marching units, cavalry units, tanks, and I think they're going to have the 3rd Regiment, the Army Fife and Drum Corps from Washington, D.C. in the parade. So if you like the Army, you're going to get a lot of it next year. And at Fleet Week, the Army was a big show there. They had a tank, and the Army invaded Fleet Week. So the Army is marching along, and they're going to do a good job next year.
Well, I tell you, at the exhibit area, they were there Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, of course, and the 5K in the morning with the chamber. And I actually had the chamber president and Janisha and Donna were both on the show promoting what the chamber does. So that was fantastic. But I'll tell you something. At the end on Sunday, when they were trying to close the parade, the tanks and some of the Army assets They had trouble getting everybody out of line. There were must have been 100 kids still trying to get back on. Some of them their second and third time. They were a big hit. They had a wonderful display. So yeah, that was a big hit. People taking the tents down. Of course, you can't roll any of the trucks in, to put the assets up and to leave until everybody's gone. But yeah, they had all the motorcycle. How'd you like how they started the parade with the entire Torrance Police Motorcycle Brigade came and started that parade? How'd you like that?
I tell you what, I didn't know Torrance had that many motorcycles. The Torrance has a great police department. They're actually in charge of the parade. They run the meetings. We'll start doing meetings in January, and the chief of police, the mayor, starts it off, and they turn it over to a lieutenant. And the police staff there in Torrance, the meetings are in, as you know, are in the police department, and the city of Torrance stops and does an outstanding job. I'm really proud of the city of Torrance, the citizens, the community, and the police department for putting such a spectacular event on, and they've been doing it for 62 years, with only taking a couple of years off for COVID. And all during the Vietnam War, when the military might not have been as popular as it is today, they continued their leadership. That city continued all the way through the Vietnam War, never had a problem, always got sponsorships and participation. So one of these days you might want to talk to the mayor and the chief of police of Torrance, because they always show up, and it's expensive, time-consuming, for such a quality product, that a class act. My hat's off to the city of Torrance.
Go ahead, Jensen.
Yeah, I was just going to say, my understanding is that Torrance is one of only a few cities that have the approval of the DOD to hold these kinds of events celebrating the armed forces.
You have to have Department of Defense approval to get flyovers and military equipment and military participation. But I think Torrance is the largest, last remaining Armed Forces Day celebration parade, still supported by the Department of Defense. It's hard to do. A lot of communities used to do both back in the old days, but because Memorial Day butts up against Armed Forces Day or vice versa, a lot of communities can't do both. So what a lot of communities did is moved away from Armed Forces Day and focused on Memorial Day, like Fleet Week did. But Torrance says, no. We do a small Memorial Day event at our Veterans Memorial, but we are going to continue this tradition and history of supporting the military here in Torrance, and they've lived up to their promise.
I met Mayor George Chen. And the mayor in Torrance, wonderful man. He ran in the 5K in the morning on Saturday morning. And Coast Guard Auxiliary, we had a table. The Chamber puts on a wonderful event, Chamber members. And of course, the Rotary is a big hit. They have a pancake breakfast. And, the president, Donna and Jonisha, who we see at the committee meetings, they were on my show, so that was fantastic. And they run this wonderful 5K. The mayor ran in it. It was absolutely amazing. I got a lot of pictures of it, met him. But I'll tell you what I saw, which I don't think when you get out in the public, people will treat any of their city council with such adoration and love that they did this mayor. I talked to some of the people. He had people that were not political, that know who he is and loved him. Of course, he had the crowd, and people loved him. They all wanted to be right next to him when he started the run. He ran in good time. He's in good shape, that mayor.
He's a very personable fella, easy to talk to. He doesn't have airs about him. He's recently retired from Northrop Grumman, I think. He's not a veteran, but he's a career employee in the aerospace and defense industry. Easy to talk to, very approachable, and quite the figure in Torrance. On a side note, you mentioned Jonisha. Anyway, Jonisha of the Chamber is a former soldier, so she's our plant with the Chamber of Commerce when it comes to anything to do with the Army.
Yeah, Jonisha was on the show. I didn't know that, so she's former military. I got to talk to her about that. That was fantastic. So Jensen, what do we got planned for next year? Where the Coast Guard Auxiliary, we're gonna be there. The featured branch will be the Army, so we're gonna get started earlier, be a little more organized, and have a better representation from the Auxiliary.
Yeah, I think the Auxiliary is excited. I think people that didn't make it down are disappointed and excited to go next year. I think when they saw the photos of the event and the coverage, they were all jealous, going, "Wish we'd been there." So.
Yeah, it'll be exciting. The Auxiliary, we're very active. Of course, our division, our combination of our flotillas. So there's a flotilla that meets at King Harbor Yacht Club. I've talked about King Harbor Yacht Club quite a bit, and I talked about the Marina Del Rey and all the different flotillas in our division, the neighboring division. So we're gonna have a real good showing. But I think a big hit in the exhibit area on both Saturday and Sunday was the little coastie that we have. We've got a little boat that the kids love. And I'll tell you, Tom, I got to tell you this story. So this little coastie is so cute, and we have an operator, and he's trained. There's a whole course that you have to go through. Well, do you remember his name, Jensen? He's new to the Auxiliary.
Yeah, David Padilla.
David Padilla. Worked at Disneyland for a decade. He's an actor, and he's also active in the Auxiliary. So he was the operator, and he was playing red light, green light with the little kids. So the little boat was trucking along, and it's got little eyes, and it talks to the kids, and they love it. They ran around. He played red light, green light. So I was at the USO tent, which was fantastic because they fed everybody that was working at the event. And a lady was asking if she could come in. And, of course, she was with her kids. And they told her this is just for the military personnel and the people running the booths. And he was probably the little kid was probably maybe 5. His sister was probably 7. And he was running around yelling, red light, green light, red light, green light. And unless you knew Coastie, unless you saw that they were playing that game. So I was really proud to know that we had that influence. Of course, his little sister was saying, would you cut it out? And he was saying, red light, green light. And I saw that running around, and it's just the kids had so much fun climbing all over the tanks. Tom, did you make it to the exhibit area at all?
Yes, I did twice, before the parade and after the parade. I know we're running out of time, but two real quick stuff. The vintage warbirds that flew over the parade came from the Western Museum of Flight at the Torrance Airport. That's a story in itself. But these are all private vintage warbirds, D-25, P-51s, Goonie birds. Excellent job by Cindy Maka in the Western Museum of Flight. And speaking of the Coast Guard, we just had the Memorial Day throughout the country, and the keynote speaker of the Redondo Beach Memorial Day ceremony was Captain Stacy Creasy, who's commander of Sector LAL Long Beach in San Pedro, captain of the port, who happens to be a resident of Redondo Beach, and she was at the parade also. So another shout out for our United States Coast Guard.
Yeah, I was there. I'm going to cover that. And we got to have a whole separate show, Tom. I want to invite you back, Jensen as well, to come back next week. We barely scratched the surface with you. So I'm going to talk about that and have a separate show on the Western Museum of Flight. Tom, thanks so much for joining us. Well, that's all the time that we have for you today. I hope you enjoyed our show. As always, we're so very fortunate to have such wonderful and exciting guests. And I want to thank our in-studio guest and Tom Lasser for coming on. And let's not forget the Coasties, protecting our waters, America's lifesavers and guardians of the sea. Remember, if you do it right and follow the guidelines and safety precautions, there's no place like being out on the water in the fresh air and sunshine in beautiful, sunny Southern California. Here at the Boating Hour with Captain Rick, we cover everything that sails, motors, and floats from San Diego to Santa Barbara. Thanks for being with us today. Please be sure to join us next week and every Saturday at 4 p.m. We're going to have Jensen in next week. Tom, again, I want to thank you for coming on the show. And thanks to our sponsor for our show today for a healthy gut, Livia One Probiotics and Raycom Radios. Reliable two-way radios throughout Southern California without drop zones, dead batteries, and all the inherent limitations of other communication systems. Mobile Relay Associates, Raycom Radios. You can see them at mra-raycom.com. Don't forget to visit us on the web at theboatinghour.com. Now on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble, The Boating Hour with Captain Rick. And coming up next week, Jensen will be here to talk about the Coast Guard Auxiliary and about the rescue. We got all kinds of stuff coming up. I'll talk about Fleet Week And hopefully I can get Captain Creasy. What do you think, Jensen? I'd love to get her on the show. And I was at the change of watch with Captain Manning to Captain Creasy. So thanks for being with us today. Ahoy and fair winds to all.